Good morning or good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Willapa Bay and Grace Harbor Fisheries discussion meeting. I'm going to go ahead and wait a couple minutes so we make sure that everybody's online, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, I think our participant numbers have leveled off here. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'll start with our public meeting guidelines and etiquette. So upon joining the virtual meeting, your microphone will be muted automatically. If you have any technical issues during the meeting, please notify us in the chat and we'll help you. Please note that we're only monitoring the chat for technical assistance with the Zoom meeting. Public comments are welcome and we'll rotate those between attendees. To ask a question or make a comment, please use your device's raise hand feature. If you're on the phone, dial *9 on Zoom or *5 on Microsoft Teams. And if using a computer, click the hand reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. During the comment period, the host will enable you to unmute yourself, and you can unmute yourself by pressing the mute button on your device or dialing *6 on the phone. Keep your discussions focused on our agenda items and the questions at hand. Offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity, personal attacks, threats, or insults towards individuals, governments, or organizations is strictly prohibited. Assume positive intentions from those speaking and listen respectfully. To ensure a balanced discussion, please limit your comments to 2 minutes and with one clarifying follow-up question. Provide constructive feedback regarding the fisheries in which you participate. Remember that the most compelling comments are those that pertain to the topics under discussion. Staff may close public comment to stay on schedule with the agenda or to provide others who still need a comment with an opportunity to speak. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted online. And if you have any further questions or comments, please submit them in written format on our public comment webpage, which you can click on the link that you see there. Next slide, please. Okay, again, good evening, everyone. My name is Marlene Wagner, and I am the agency's South Coast Policy Lead. We're here tonight to share proposals for the 2024 salmon season and to have a discussion with you to hear your thoughts on these proposals and hear additional fisheries proposals that you might have. I have a number of staff with me here tonight, including the regional fish biologists for Grace Harbor and Willapa Bay, who will be helping me share our presentation tonight. Next slide. I will briefly here review the North of Falcon process that we covered more extensively in our February 28th regional meeting and at North of Falcon 1 and 2. So we really start the process by forecasting the abundance of each stock. And then we determine if there is a harvestable surplus. We model the fisheries to determine any constraining stocks, and we predict what we will catch. And then, depending on the area, we negotiate with treaty tribes and other states on allocation. Next slide, please. Here's just the remainder of the North of Falcon public meeting schedule for 2024. We just wrapped up the North of Falcon 2 meeting in Linwood. We are here tonight, February 28th, for our joint Willapa Bay and Grace Harbor fisheries discussion. Next week, from April 6th to 11th in Seattle, will be the second Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting. And then on April 16th, we will meet you here again to share our final draft fisheries package for Willapa Bay and Grace Harbor. You can find every meeting that we are holding for North Falcon on the website at the link listed at the bottom of this slide. Next, please. So moving into our proposed non-treaty ocean quotas for 2024. Here are the three alternatives for non-treaty quotas with the 2023 numbers listed for comparison. Chinook quotas for all three alternatives are quite similar to last year, but our coho numbers are lower than last year, which are largely reflecting a lower Columbia River hatchery run and expected low abundance of some natural origin stocks. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mike Scharf and Aaron Whitcup, our Grace Harbor and Willapa Bay fish biologists, starting with Mike. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate you being with us, and thank you for the comments and things that we've heard since our first meeting. So since our first meeting, and based on some of the forecasts that we have, some of the issues that are needing to be addressed are a little bit lower of a Chinook number, and then some of the things that we've heard. If we can go to the next slide. So I think I talked a little bit about this in the first meeting, but hump tulips Chinook forecast is a little bit lower than we've seen it in a few years, and kind of to address that lower forecast, my initial proposal for a recreational fishery there is just simply same season as last year, but reduce it down to a 1 fish limit. And I think we also are proposing to go mark selective for the whole season for Chinook, as opposed to, I think we had September was open to any Chinook. So that's one of the proposals that is a little bit changed from last season. We also heard some discussion and some concerns on adult Chinook being encountered during the jack fishery, which is that lower Chehalis River from August 1st through middle September. And I've had some conversations with some constituents and with enforcement to try to come up with a means to address that concern, and didn't really get any strong support for gear restrictions. We also heard the possibility of maybe not allowing bait, but we also heard that is the key method to catch jacks. So I think what my proposal will be going through, and you know, we still have until next week, but reducing that boundary of that jack fishery to the Fuller Bridge downstream. Enforcement helped me understand where they thought the major issues were happening, and so this seemed to be the best fit from what I gathered. And of course, the other big issue that we heard is what can we do in the December fishery? And we've sent out a couple of proposals of things, and in the Chehalis side, the real major thing that we may do is, are we fishing through the month of December or only till the 15th, or are we going to close December? And that hasn't really been decided, but as we move forward, I would like to keep that on the table. All of the models that I've put together provide enough support to get through there with the fish that we have. I think I covered the next slide already, but if we go to the next slide. This is just kind of a general rundown of the different models that we put together. And really, the only change you see is the bag limit in the hump tulips. Between all three models, it's just basically going from a 2 fish to a one fish. And well, that's right, we were wild Chinook release all of last year, so that didn't change. And then the difference between model A and B is just removing the last 2 weeks of December in the fishery. And then Model C is just the same thing, except closing it on November 1st. At the end of November, sorry about that. And there have also been some discussions about if we have to close, can we move some of those impacts from December earlier in the season? And of course, we've looked at that. I'm not sure I want to go as far as presenting a Model D to show that, but that is certainly something that we're thinking about. Next slide. And here is just kind of the differences of the number of harvest or impacts that you see in each of the models. There really isn't a lot of change between them. But it's there to just kind of give everybody a general understanding of, if we go to this one, what do we lose or what do we gain? So I don't think I'm going to go into deep detail into this slide. It's something you guys can look at on your own. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, we didn't really talk much about the non-treated commercial fishery at our last meeting, but it's something that we are responsible to provide. So last year we had a couple of days in, I think it was late September, early October, with the lower Chinook numbers that are out there and the need to protect those. What I did was propose a schedule that starts the second week in October and just 2 days, 2 days, 3 days, 2 days. That's the original, or my proposal as we move forward. Unfortunately, when we were up in Linwood the last couple of days, we didn't have that opportunity to have discussions with the Quinaults. We have received their initial proposal. It's something that we could work with, but it's going to take some movement, just days, who gets to fish first, that kind of thing, as we move forward. But that's something that's going to take place when we are in Seattle, and not next week, but the week after. So I think that's the end of my presentation.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Can you take it to the next slide, please? Hi again, I'm Erin Whitcop. I'm the new, as of January, a Willapa Bay fisheries biologist. So I'm really happy to be here and hope to be able to meet more of you as time goes on, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any further comment. Yeah, looking forward to talking with more of you. Next slide, please. So we have several proposals that we're considering this year, and this is based on public comments that we've received. And it's also based on conversations with enforcement for the Willapa Bay, and as well as our analysis of the data that we have. And the first major issue that we're proposing to address is a decrease that we've noticed in the Nacelle and Willapa rivers around the last 5 years of wild coho escapement spawning numbers. And this is concerning to us. And though it's really important to continue to provide wild fishery opportunity, we also recognize our role in conserving wild stocks. And so this is something we want to address using a mark selective coho fishery in the Willapa and Nacelle rivers specifically. And alongside this, we have been working with our commercial policy team, as well as commercial fishers, to try to adjust the commercial fishing schedule, particularly in areas toward the mouth of the Willapa River, 2U and 2T, to try to also protect wild coho numbers in those areas. So that's something we're considering and would appreciate your feedback on. Another rule that we have also received significant public comment about is the issue of snagging on the Nacelle River. And we have had meetings with constituents and thinking about talking to enforcement about creative rules to address this. And one proposal that we are seriously considering is the language you see here on this slide. From August 1st through October 15th, any fish which is not legally hooked shall count toward the daily bag limit. We understand this is a creative idea that has not been tried in this area before, And the intent of this idea is really to reduce this snagging behavior and yeah, have people not want to use this behavior. And to clarify kind of what that would mean, so any fish not legally hooked, for example, dorsal fin, belly, somewhere behind the gill plate, that those fish would have to be released, and they also are counting toward your daily bag limit. We're still working out the details of this rule and would really appreciate suggestions. And we're also thinking about metrics to try to understand whether this rule is having an effect in the nacelle. I would also appreciate suggestions regarding that. The final proposal we're seriously considering for this year is trying to reduce gear conflicts in particular sections of the Nacelle River, as well as try to protect natural origin fish that are being moved upstream at the Nacelle hatchery. So specifically, we're considering restricting fishing from a floating device from the full spanning concrete diversion structure at the Nacelle hatchery upstream to the Big Hill Bridge. Okay, next slide, please. This is a table showing what the numbers would look like if we implement several of these proposals, specifically the mark selective coho fishery. The A model, the NALF, the new abundances last year's fishery, shows our new abundances or our forecasts, but with last year's rules. And similar to what Mike did, we'll leave this here. It's on the website available for you to look at the numbers more specifically. But some things people might be interested in are the allocation percentage by sector, comparing rec and commercial between A and then B. Our B proposal is adding in the coho mark selective, specifically adding in the Willapa nacelle. But keep in mind, we also did coho mark selective on the nacelle, on the Palix, Middle Fork, and South Fork Nema rivers last year. So we would preserve those rules. And we would continue to have one wild coho retention on the North Smith, Bear, and North Nema. Next slide, please. This is a bit more of a description of those proposals again in words. So our A, NALF model, and the B, coho mark selective model. And everything in blue text are the changes that we are proposing for this year. So you can see in the B model for natural coho daily limit, it's gone down to 0 in the Willapa, Nacelle, Palix, Middle, and South Fork Nema, with a 2 hatchery coho daily limit there. And then 1 wild coho retention for the North Smith, Bear, and North Nema. And for the commercial changes, we're suggesting starting week 33 in the South Bay through week 38, 2U through week 40, in November, 2T NR weeks 44 through 48, 2U and M weeks 45 through 48. This is a proposal that we've received that we're considering, but we're still open to changes to these schedules. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll hand it back to Marlene. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron and Mike. So we're at the discussion portion of our meeting this evening, and we'd like to open it up to the audience to provide your suggestions and comments. Leah?
Yeah, so for those online, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 or the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. Depending on the Zoom that you're using, it could be a reactions tab with a smiley face.
This is Ross Barker. Can you hear me? I'm on the phone. I tried to raise my hand.
Yeah, we can hear you, Ross. Go ahead.
Thank you. I took a look at in a couple of things I noticed. In one, first, the mortality on Chinook, which is the only recreational priority for nets, is 417. For recreational, it's 134. So that's a little out of whack there. The other thing is that our only recreational priority using the NELF, the nets get 25% more keeper Chinook than the Rex do, and we need to really need to reverse that, or there's no really priority on anything. I have 2 suggestions. One is if you would rerun the model and no nets in 2M before September 10th and see if that makes how many more that and recreational in fresh water. The other thing is that to take a look at the limits. I have a suggestion on recreational limits, North Nema and Nazelle, that would really several different ways, and that is the normal limit would be 2 Chinook, but if you only kept one hen, then it would be 3. So you would get rid of surplus bucks and that would really help the ratio. Along with that, we need to open the Nazelle River up to the hatchery deadline. I attended the lecture on last year on the new weir. It's not going to help PHOS at all. It's not going to solve the Chinook PHOS problem because a lot of them below the hatchery, and so ask you run a model with no nets in 2M and 2M before September 10th. If that doesn't work, Chinook harvested by recreational fish, then run it for September 15th. And also look at the, as I mentioned, the 3 fish harvest. They only take one hen because we need to make egg take. And on the other hand, there are always surplus bucks fed to the dog food. So you could kill with one stone. I think that would be a good item. The other thing is we need to minimize recreational gear limits. I mean, it's so confusing and so complicated that we got to look at enforcement and running with what we've got. And in the Nazelle, if you need to use a float, fine. And if the game warden thinks the guy's got 30 feet of line under his float, he's not really using it, fine. He ought to use his judgment and call it out. But we used to joke amongst ourselves about these days we'll just be using a green hooksie with no hook in it. Some of the things that we see, they do need to be hooked in the head. They do need to be put back if they're not. Have no clue how, when you accidentally foul hook a fish and put it back, have no clue how that counts on your limits. Have no clue whatsoever. So I just practicable at all. But if we could do that, and if we could have enforcement, I think that we could improve PHOS, which was a major problem in Nazelle. And it's nice that we get all these fish back, but if PHOS to death, well, the then it isn't really aren't just fishing, and we want to make egg take. If we could only take one hen, but take 2, really help. And we need to end up with recreational fishers harvesting more hatchery Chinook than the nets, or we got no pride on anything. And I hope you would take a look at that. Have any questions? Please advise.
Hey, Ross. Thank you. This is Erin. Thanks a lot for your comments. Would you mind also sending an email with some of your comments? We had some audio issues on the line, and I really want to make sure I heard them all.
Yes, I could. Yeah, I have it written down in scratch, but I could turn it into an email, and we just really need to, we don't have escapement crossing the bar, and we'll just hit them with 20%. That's not going to work. The old policy had 14%, and it took until 2033 to meet escapement. And I see no way that you'll ever meet escapement without some of the changes that I suggested. And at the end of the day, you got to meet PHOS, and do not see where your models help with that, but I think that if you get a reward for keeping $2 and only one hen, that would, a lot of people are, you got to recognize, you know, most people out there are not retired. Okay, the guy gets a weekend to fish. The tides aren't right for him, and that's the 2 days he gets, and he gets 1 or 2 fish, and the nets are in from August on. You know, the recreational party has no chance. We need to give the Rex a chance, and but I will put it in an email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Our next hand is from Mara. Mara, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think my question is for Aaron. I have a question about the coho mark selective fishery that you are planning for the Willapa and Nacelle. I am definitely supportive of thinking about spatially allowing that overall escapement goal to spread out across the rivers. I was hoping you could speak a little bit more about what your specific concern is for the Willapa and Nacelle, what you're seeing there, what you would like to see. And then my second question is, could you talk a bit about what you know or anticipate in terms of mark rates with that mark selected fishery? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mara. I did want to clarify, by mark rates, you mean at the hatchery level?
No, when you are anticipating catch rates in the fishery, how many wild fish to go through before you encounter a hatchery fish?
That's a great question. I do not know the answer, but I will do the research and
Okay, thanks.
and figure that out. And if one of my colleagues on the call has that answer, please feel free to chime in. And your second question about what we're hoping to see, you're right. We manage in our policy. We have specific bay-wide escapement goals for coho and Chinook. However, we also have a mandate in the policy, and Marlene can speak more to this, to protect wild stocks in specific rivers. And we have river-specific coho escapement goals, wild coho escapement goals that we are targeting. And we have that data that we can provide as a handout potentially after the meeting to make it publicly available, where we highlight several years in the past 5 years that are below escapement by several hundred fish in some cases. And we're hoping to increase those wild numbers at least to our goal and aim for higher. Our intent is that if these stocks start having increased returns that are meeting our river specific escapement goals, that we would consider going non-mark selective in the future if our returns are looking better. And I see James, I think, turn on his camera if you want to chime in.
Yeah, Aaron, I thought you did a good job with that answer there. The thing I would add, Mara asked about mark rates, and Mara, you know, for all these mark selective fisheries, if we have an overwhelming number of unmarked fish, mark selective doesn't make sense. If we're just sorting through, you know, dozens of wild fish to find a hatchery fish, that doesn't make sense. In this case, Willapa Bay wide, at our first public meeting, we showed forecast numbers, spent some time on that. And I think we had a coho forecast Willapa Bay that was about 90,000 hatchery fish and about 30,000 natural origin. We should kind of fact check those numbers. But when we were talking about mark selective, we were thinking like a 3-to-1 hatchery to wild rate. And so it makes a lot of sense to us to think about mark selective fisheries as a tool here, because we know that folks that fish the Nacelle and Willapa are most likely still to get their bag limit. They're still going to go home with their bag limit, but it'll be comprised in this case of all hatchery fish. Why that's pretty cool in this situation, we think, is because as the natural origin escapement has gone up in recent years, and we've been really proud of that. We've, you know, made some progress. We look at these hatchery rivers like Willapa and Nacelle, and our expert there, Nick Van Buskirk, you know, and others on the team have noticed that those wild escapements particularly are still in decline. So rivers like North River are really lofting up that bay-wide escapement, and rivers with hatchery, coho, are seeing large surpluses to the hatchery and not meeting our escapement in the natural environment. So a lot there, but in this case, Mark Selective is a pretty cool tool that we could apply, probably not affect total harvest much coho, but probably affect the natural ordinance escapement in a big way.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mara.
Our next hand is from Neil. Neil, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Hi, first of all, great work. Appreciate all the work you guys done for modeling these numbers. Regarding the Grays Harbor recreational seasons, wanted to express support for Model B. I do see that it goes to December 15th. I think Mike mentioned something about maybe moving some of those December impacts around, messing with the bag limit earlier in the season. I'm not sure how far those thoughts had went, but if it were up to me, just my personal opinion, would be, very, very supportive of like maybe a 3 fish limit in October. I guess the one concern, at least for me, would be impacts on wild fish. So maybe having, a 3 fish bag limit with no more than 1 wild for October or even October, November. I'm not holding my breath for December opportunity after the last couple of years, but if so, great. But I'm not hoping for it. So some earlier season additional numbers would be great.
Thanks very much. That's a good idea, and I've jotted it down, and I'm gonna push real hard to get us that December time period.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next hand is from Larry. Larry, go ahead.
Hi, it's me again. So my questions are about in regards to the natural origin wild coho and your considerations there. Hopefully, I'm a Willapa Bay recreational fisherman, basically launching out to Oakland and fishing that lower end bay. My question is that on the what's the biggest impact of those natural origin fish?
I tend to ramble as my comments go on. So I end up like reiterating.
My apologies. Somebody unmuted. Go ahead, Larry.
That's okay. So as a bay recreational fisherman, I can't imagine that the impact of the bay recreational fisheries has a substantial impact on your wild fish that are returning versus about what commercial impact would be. Now, I'm not anti-commercial by any means, just knowing the times that we're out there and when the run comes in. It's certainly been nice to be able to keep an unclipped natural origin fish, in that bay recreational fishery. The freshwater returns, that sort of stuff, I don't know about that, but that's my question is what's really the impact on those natural origin returns? Like, as a bay recreational fishery, I can't see that we have a whole lot of impact on it, especially if you look at our catches here the last few years. And I don't know if that's ever a consideration that you'd allow the bay to keep natural origin wild coho and others to change, because the others are the big impact. Commercial is obviously the big impact. And then also in regards to that, the RFEGs that are in the area, regional fisheries enhancement groups, have done a great job here in a lot of programs, mostly for coho, but some, chum also. How do you treat those fish? And they're basically raised. I got the number someplace how many they released, but it's been substantial. They've had some substantial success here in returns. I talked to John quite a bit about that, and it's been a great program. But they're unclipped going out, and that so how do you treat those fish?
Thanks, Larry. Let's see, I might need some assistance from my colleagues to answer some of these questions, but we do have numbers for the impacts, at least for the commercial fishery, for where fish are coming from. So that's something that we can model when they're caught commercially in the bay. Regarding the impact of the RSIs, you're right, those fish are unclipped. So when they return, we're not able to tell that they're hatchery fish. And currently those fish are not included in our modeling process because we don't know what their origin is.
So it's been a great program. I wish that they shift over a little bit to the Chinook side of things also. But, you know, again, it's fish that are in that hopefully it helps impact the naturals coming back into the tributaries that they're releasing into, but, you know, but they are hatchery eggs reared up and, you know, but I'd like to be able to keep natural origin unclipped fish out in the bay. We can't have a whole lot of impact on things. You know, the commercial guys, you know, got to be the main impact. And then you can talk about the rivers, tributaries if you want. I don't know about that, but okay, thanks.
Hey, and this is James here. I would just add, my answer is no different than Aaron's. There's a lot of moving pieces there. And the reason for that is you just asked a couple really good questions. So when we look at the impacts from these different fisheries, I really encourage you kind of offline, we can share with anyone on the call. But Larry, if you want to dig into specific details about different fisheries and expected impacts, you know, really open to have those conversations with you. There's, you know, take a bunch of time and some more spreadsheets. And then in terms of the RSIs, this is a big conversation with us, with our team, not just here, but statewide about how these RSIs. So for folks that don't know, these remote site incubators, this is where volunteers and RFEGs raise you know, eggs and egg boxes in the environment and then release them as juveniles. So of course, Larry, they're not marked, so you're right on there. So again, be great to fold you into that conversation. Sounds like you've got some expertise, so maybe we'll shift that conversation though around RFEGs and RSIs down the road if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, sure. You know, I'd like to see the same emphasis towards your fall Chinook programs, you know, too, but, you know, go from there.
Thanks, Larry.
I just really asked about the coho stuff. I don't know, do I get a chance to come back? You know, my concerns here, so I don't know, looked at all your numbers stuff, but, you know, they're pretty decent. But as a bay recreational fisherman, is what two things is that the release numbers from Forks Creek is what impacts the bay recreational fishery. And that I don't know if there's been any real adjustment to that. Secondly, as importantly, is improving the SARs for all the hatcheries. We've had this discussion, you know, here, but that will impact the bay as a recreational fishery. So again, you know, those releases of Fort Creek, if anybody doesn't know it, that's what impacts the bay recreational fishery. And, you know, although last, you know, in 2020, they released 2.5 million and that they didn't come back. So whatever was there. But either way, you know, and improving the SARs, that, because you know how that all can balance out and all that sort of stuff. So those are my concerns here for the bay recreational fishery. Is Fort Creek is what, you know, what impacts the bay. All those fish that you're releasing in the south end, you know, don't really do it for the upper bay and all those boats out there. So thanks.
Thanks, Larry.
You know, but I've only got a few minutes.
Yeah, and Larry, I'd reiterate, I really encourage you, you know, feel free to reach out anytime. This isn't your only opportunity to chat with us. So we're working next week too, and lots of time to chat. So, but I mean, I say that North Falcon process is moving fast, but you should definitely give us a call if you got more you want to share there.
Yeah, most of my stuff is long-term stuff, you know, the SARs and improving that. You know, you are where you are. Increasing the Forks Creek releases is a whole other story until you can get the SARs better across the board. You know, I know, you know, that they're making some efforts in doing that, you know, but there's a lot of things that can help that. But The Forks Creek leases is what has impacted historically that Bay recreational fishery. And that, until you can get them, until we can get the SCRs better, which could be short term, there's, and they're working on it, but anyway. Okay, thanks, James. I mean, we were gonna touch bases in between, and I don't know if I missed you, but thanks.
Thanks, Larry. Our next hand is from Eric. Eric, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we've got you.
Okay. I had a question about the distribution of coho impact for Grays Harbor on the rec side. I guess my thoughts are kind of mirroring. I believe it was Neil earlier brought up about consideration of shifting some of the impacts from November back in the event we lose December. I'm also not real optimistic about that opportunity coming forward. I know it's all tied to negotiation with the co-managers over the steelhead issue. I guess what the question that's kind of burning in my head is one of timing. I think it was Mike Sharp mentioned you have the 3 models that were up earlier on one of the earlier slides, possible seasons. And he mentioned about a possible Model D if we lost December. The timing thing, my concern is, I don't know at what point when, I don't know if you guys, if and when you get your steelhead forecast for next winter, and when that negotiation begins about whether or not we get December, my concern would be is when those negotiations begin, if they're too late in the salmon season, do we lose some impacts that we could have shifted earlier on, in the event we lose December? I don't know if I'm making much sense there, but I guess my takeaway is, again, not knowing what the steelhead issue is going to be this coming winter, but give heavy consideration to shifting impacts earlier into Grays Harbor. Thanks for coho.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for your comments. Certainly there is always some sort of risk. And certainly we're going to have those conversations with Quinault tribe. And if we look like we're not going to get anywhere, then certainly the sooner the better is the best thing to do. I also wanted to just make a quick friendly announcement that if you notice the NOF in the Model A and the Chehalis coho numbers are a little different, they should probably be the same. The reason for that is we updated Model A, B, and C with the most recent coho Fram model run that came out of partway through the meetings we just had a couple of days ago, and we didn't update NOFT. So NOFT is operating on one of the older coho model runs. So sorry about that, I didn't catch it. So if you see the difference between the two, it's just because I neglected to update NOFT. So sorry about that. They should be the same number.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Our next hand is from Dave. Dave, go ahead.
We got her unmuted.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, this will be for Mike, and I got a 2-step it here, more or less. On that closure above Fuller Hill, I understand what you're kind of saying, but may I assume, because I haven't got the full model in front of me, which I'd like to have, by the way, the priors, can I assume the priors on Chinook for Alaska and British Columbia are going to be about the same this year as last year? Correct, okay. Considering that's about half the run, give or take, add change years. And then you got the bay, and then you got the tidewater, and then you got the river up there going up, and below Fuller Hills tidewater too. the problem, you're going from Fuller Hill to South Elma. Can you give me a number of adults you're thinking this is removing from the escapement?
So Dave, this is not a conservation move. This is not to try to save more Chinook. This is to address a concern that we've heard for a couple of years now that adult Chinook are being targeted in certain areas within and during the time frame of the jack fishery. And there's no, I don't have any ability to model a savings of Chinook there. It's about a 1.5 miles or a 2-mile section of river for those that aren't familiar with the two boundary lines.
So basically, let's just to be clear, it's not a snagging issue. It's an issue of people fishing legally. The optics of
It's
that.
addressing a concern that we've heard for a number of years that many adult Chinook are being targeted and reports of dead fish in the bottom of the river in certain areas. And it was a discussion I had with several constituents and our enforcement as the best means. And if you remember, in the first meeting, there were conversations about not allowing bait to try to address the problem. Could a smaller hook help address the problem of reducing adult encounters during the jack fishery? So in the conversations that I've had with folks out there that are familiar with what goes on out there, this was kind of the best move that we could make to address the concern that we've heard from several different constituents.
So, to be honest, if you want to boil it down in just pure English, the optics of what going on fishing legally, there are those that object to it, correct?
Nope.
Then
It's
what
just
is,
addressing some concerns of dead fish and a whole bunch of adults. I mean, we could see problems everywhere, people utilizing different seasons and openers to target other things. And we've made some moves last year on the Satsup and the Wainuchi in the August and September timeframe, when those systems are not open for salmon retention, but because people are targeting them under the guise of another fishery being open. You know, we're just addressing, we're trying to figure out the best way to provide the opportunity and to address concerns that are out there, which is, you know, encounters of wild Chinook while people are targeting jacks.
how is that different from any other catch and release fishery, Mike?
I'm just saying, during that time frame, there is a concern, and we've seen it and we addressed it while still providing opportunity.
So, okay, so you have the optics of people that are fishing illegally, but they're grabbing a fish that you don't want them to get. So basically the solution is to remove the opportunity.
The opportunity is still there. You can fish from Fuller Bridge down to Highway 101.
That's kind of dodging the question, Mike. You know, we're not talking Fuller Hill down, we're talking Fuller Hill.
I'm just
South Elma.
saying, you have opportunity. I'm not removing opportunity, I'm just moving where it can happen.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good wordsmithing, Mike. Could you put up the 3 options again?
Whoever's running the slideshow, could you move it? I think it was to the blue table screen. Is that the one you're looking for, Dave? That one?
There we go. Okay.
That's a little small to see.
Excuse me. Okay, so when you look at these, at the hump, I don't go around, I don't know. But when I'm seeing is 2, you got last year, and just kind of disregard it. So you got A, that gives you the December season, 2 fish bag, okay. You got B, which is 2 fish bag, but it goes to December 1st. And
December 15th.
you got the Model C goes September 16th, November 30th. So I see your three timeframes. My
Yep.
question is simply on Model A, would you go to December 1st? I got that, okay. The, the late coho, and there's all sorts of the true lates in January and December and everything else, but we're just going to December 31st. You got the one fish bag release Chinook. That makes sense. But the thing about it is, that's a weaker part of the run, okay? And to be honest, why wouldn't you just go one fish bag or even two fish bag, but just hatchery? Okay, because you got to realize when we're tribs above Fuller Hill, that's there, and then you got the lower main stem, and it stays the same right there. The point of all this is the upper basin. They have the later time coho, but both have the Bingham Lakes and the Skook Mitt. So I'm not exactly certain why you couldn't have a release wild and just have two hatchery. Okay.
So which time frame are you talking about?
This on the December 1 to December 31st.
Okay. So you're talking about increasing the bag limit
Well,
in the December time
no,
frame?
changing what's in the bag. If you release wild coho, you can keep two hatchery, and with the Skook Mitt and the Bingham releases, that's about 700,000, 750, I think, just going from memory, smolt. So, and they have a lower survival rate than normal time, but still, that's a huge hunk of the hatchery production right there. And so your interaction while the hatchery, this part of it here right there is where you probably got the better side of hatchery over the wild. So, and with if you release them and water's cold and stuff, your mortality is way down in that time of year versus the summer fishery, late summer. So why not just go to hatchery instead of keeping wild? The hooking mortality would be low, and you'll that's a huge portion of the hatchery run. So I'm just
We'll
saying.
have to go dig back into the harvest records, because there is a couple of week period of time, and I can't remember if it's end of November, early December, when for some reason the hatchery wild component is overwhelmingly on the hatchery or the wild side. And when we had mark selective fishery in the later part of the season, I did hear a lot of people complain about having to sort through a lot of wild fish just to get to the hatchery fish.
Yeah, well,
I'll have to dig into it and see if I have, because I have those data set somewhere. I just haven't looked at it in a little bit, so I know exactly which week that happens. But that's another consideration that I've got it written down. I'll take a look at it and see what happens.
yeah, the late November timing, especially for the Satsum, I'm old, okay? That's the Turkey Day fish. That's the old natural run timing, okay? Things got kind of shifted around over time. So there's a bump there when that's where the wild, I think you're right, they come in. But that bump only is in the latter part of November, maybe a little bit in December, and then it fades right out. Okay, so I guess you could get into circumstances where you're into the tail end of the normals, the front end of the Bingham style lates. So your mixed match of hatchery and wild can get a little out of sorts, but it's only for a 7 or 8 day period. And then it's going to level itself out to what it always does going toward the end of December.
Gotcha.
So it just, and you got to, so yeah, there's a window there it can do. I won't disagree what it says. It also depends just when they come in, but they're not rain driven near as much as the normal time. So I'm just saying, and when you look at the season set up, I have problems with placing conservation on above Fuller Hill and that group of people, and yet BC and Canada will take half, damn near half our run. Then you got the Bay and they do catch and release, and Tidewater does catch and release. And by the way, there's people on the Marine and the Bay that they fish for coho, but they're going to get 3 times as many Chinook. I mean, it's something that goes with catch and release. I'm just saying. So that is a standard you're not applying from the Marine all the way up. This is a different standard you're placing on a 1.5 miles of river. Okay. And it's just optics. After that, there's no reason to pass on these hatchery fish when you can catch and release the wild fish in December, because your mortality is low because of the water and everything else, and the fish are moving, they're not holding. That's not the way those fish move. So it's really a better idea to keep 2 adults hatchery during that time frame and release wild. Okay, it just numerically makes sense.
Thanks, Dave. Good
Thanks,
comments.
Dave. Our next hand is from Garrett. Garrett, go ahead. Garrett, you can unmute.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you.
All right. I would like to, on Grace Harbor fisheries, I'd like to support my, or put my support for option B. I think that would give us, you know, we can try and get at least the first half of December in there. I've voiced my concerns before, but that December fishery is really important to the upper basin. I kind of would partially agree with some of the stuff the previous caller said. You know, if I mean, we get a lot of hatchery fish up in the upper basin in that December fishery. If a two coho limit but clipped only would work, I mean, that would be a viable option. But overall, I'd say I support option B. And hopefully, if we can come to an agreement at some point with the co-managers on this December and steelhead, or if our steelhead runs start improving, we can get back to that whole month. But if we can at least try and model to at least fish the first couple weeks of December, and then I know I'd heard some talk about a potential model D if steelhead forecasts come out and it looks like it's definitely going to be an issue. If we can make an in-season adjustment in October or November, maybe throw an extra fish, you know, like an extra hatchery fish in the bag limit, just if we know we're not going to be able to use our December impacts, that would be great. So that's all I've got for now. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mike, and Garrett, thanks for those comments. Mike, I've heard a couple folks mention this idea of modeling, trying to understand what a December closure would do to the rest of the fishery. Like if there's some, you know, modeling that would allow us to understand what a December closure would do. And if I remember right, last year we looked into that really closely. Is there anything you can say about sort of, and just to be a little bit more clear, Garrett's talking about this in-season action that would, you know, maybe add additional bag limit or shift the fishery if we know we're going to close December in season. Is there much of a benefit to our fishery earlier if we close in December?
Yeah, if we close, it's a savings of about 686 fish according to the model in that first 2 weeks of December. And for the whole month of December, it's about 1,500 fish. So that could be redistributed, going to a 3 fish limit. It could be done. I mean, it's simply just moving those impacts to another time frame. So it doesn't save you anything. You just redistribute them, but it's going to be about 1,500 fish. So about 10% of what is caught.
Thanks, Mike. And yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to be clear for all the callers, when Mike and I and others on the team talk about closing Grays Harbor for steelhead, we all kind of roll our eyes a little bit because we want to be fishing in December. So our intention is to go fishing for salmon in December. And then in October and November, when we have steelhead forecasts in place, design steelhead fisheries that protect steelhead and allow us to encounter coho in sort of these late season fisheries. So just want to make it clear that that's our intention. But Garrett, I really like the creative thinking. If we learn in season that we're going to run into trouble, then let's make the most of these salmon fisheries. So thanks.
Okay, our next hand looks like it's from Larry. Larry, go ahead.
Well, I didn't see anybody else.
No.
So, I put my hand back up. You know, as always, and this comments to James and Aaron. So, you know, I'm a recreational bay fisherman. Our primary fishery is fall chinook out there with some coho from time to time. So in looking at your forecast numbers here for your North Falcon process, it's, you know, I would agree you're pretty close to what your historical SARs are. The reason for I asked again here, and this is, so your releases in 2021 were 8,277,612. Your forecast for hatchery rigid fish coming back in is 27,327. And that's terrible. You know, that's a 0.3%. I've reversed, that's 99.67% of the fish you released didn't come back in the bay. And you gotta work on that. You know, in the long run here, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. It's gonna be the same for a couple of years, but you gotta work on that. That's, you know, and that's the easiest thing to make your job, you guys' job, the easiest in the long run, is working on improving those SCRs. I don't know if you've heard my commercial about Priest Rapids Hatchery. Priest Rapids Hatchery, 400 river miles up to Columbia, 4 major barriers. They release 7.5 million fish a year, plus or minus 100,000. I think it was 6. They got 51,000 back to the rack in 2023. That doesn't count the tens and tens and tens of thousands of fish that were fished on from the mouth of the Columbia back up to the Hanford Reach by recreational fisheries. And they've changed a lot of their things that they've been doing. And I know I forwarded on to John's and that they've made some changes, but that's my point in this, my comment here. I'm a bay fisherman, fall chinook, whether it's here or Grays Harbor. That's what you got to work on. And that's my final thought. And I know that they are. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. And that was our last hand for right now. So just a reminder to those that have called in, if you want to raise your hand, you can dial *9. And go ahead.
This is Larry still.
Oh, hold on, Larry. We have a caller with their hand up. Go ahead.
This is Steve.
Hi, Steve. Go ahead.
Okay, hey, couple things. This would be all related to predominantly the nacelle and Willapa Bay, but first I got a question, and maybe this is a James or maybe even a Kelly question, but the anti-snag rule that's currently in the books, does staff have authorization to make those changes through the North of Falcon process? Or would changes to that rule have to go through the rulemaking process?
I guess I'm not totally clear. If you're saying a statewide change to the definition of the anti-snagging rule, I think that would be, you know, like a river specific change to the anti-snagging rule. The way we would do that is we could not have an anti-snagging rule and have some other variation of it that we design here through this process? Or are you asking, can we make a statewide adjustment to the definition of that rule in the pamphlet?
Well, I'm hoping there's a simple way of doing this. James, what I'm wanting to see is the current rule defines a legally hooked fish as in the head to the rear margin of the gill plate or in the mouth. And that's about 20% of a fish, and that's where a lot of the fish are being hooked and retained that are foul hooked. They're, you know, in the early season. I'm talking the Chinook fishery. So I would really like to see a rule, whether it's isolated to the nacelle or whatever, that defines a legally hooked fish as in the mouth on the nacelle from August 1 to, you know, well, October 15th, say. That the end date you could play with. So that's just one thing I'd like you guys to consider. So
Thanks, Steve.
The proposal, the proposal or comment that was about restricting snagging and a foul hook fish or not legally hooked fish would count against the bag limit. So would that then require that fisherman, if he landed a foul hook fish, would that require him to enter that in his punch card, or have you gotten that far yet?
No.
No, you haven't got that far, or no, it wouldn't require him to enter it.
No, and I guess
it's just gonna count towards their bag. Then is what you're saying.
yeah, I'm kind of stepping on Aaron's toes here because Aaron's done most of the real brain power behind this proposal. But maybe Aaron, before I sort of mute my mic and don't say something wrong here, I just want to make sure all the callers on the phone know this proposal that foul hooked fish or a fish that's not legal to retain because it's foul hooked would count against your bag limit was one, that we designed with the help of Steve here and others, but was originally proposed by our enforcement. And that's really important because when we have a behavior issue in any of these rivers, there's lots of rivers across the state, we struggle with this challenge of snagging. And snagging and behavior in a way that limits other anglers from enjoying the opportunity is one we want to take serious and think hard about. And so when our enforcement looks at a proposal or comes up with their own and says, this is something we could enforce, we get pretty excited about that because the enforcement element is really, really key. So, I just wanted to make sure everybody's clear on that. And then this proposal has evolved a bit because you can imagine we don't want any fish you release to count against your limit, because in a mark selective fishery, that would be pretty complicated, right? Because now you'd be getting penalized for releasing wild fish that you're required to release. So we didn't want that. So that's where we landed here. Aaron, anything to add specifically on Steve's idea about how to mark down the fish that you snagged?
Our current thinking is that that fish would not be written down on your catch record card. And our reasoning for that, so the fish that you release because they were illegally hooked, our reasoning for not writing that on the catch record card is because we use the catch record cards to understand how many fish are coming back and how many fish are taken out and harvested.
Right.
And so if you didn't really harvest that fish, it would bias our data. But this is a complexity we are still trying to work out. That's the current thinking.
Okay.
And maybe I'll just jump in really quick here, Aaron. That's helpful. And usually when I talk about enforcement, it's because I didn't know they were listening. In this case, we're lucky. We have Lieutenant Kit Rosenberger here. I'm sort of joking there. I'm really excited to hear what Kit has to offer. If there's anything we missed there, Kit.
No, this is a good question, and part of our enforcement's idea behind this was that it's similar to existing rules we have for like, I think, like put and take trout lakes. So if you're using bait, and you've caught a trout and you go to release it, it counts towards your limit, just because of the handling mortality part of it. So that was a similar mindset of what enforcement when it put into this. We have a rule that's kind of similar in a different place. Maybe we could tweak it and see if it would work in this instance. So that was our thought. Is was not something we'd think that you'd be recording or catch a red card. It's just that side of it.
Okay, I understand that, and hey, all of you guys, I appreciate that you're trying to do something, and it's a start. If this is what it ends up being, I'm going to be there trying to help you. So I really appreciate you trying to do something about that snagging there. I do want to put my support towards that gear conflict rule from the hatchery to the Big Hill Bridge. I know there are landowners that live right at that bridge that have had, it's been a nightmare for them. I thought they were going to get some comments into you. I don't know if they did or not, but it's just been hell for that house that's right there at that bridge, for all those boats that are putting in at that bridge. Destroying a garbage can, dragging garbage through the yard, parking within 30 feet of a stop sign, parking within 5 feet of their radius return, pulling into their driveway, waking up their dog. It's just been hell for them. And so, you know, it's not part of the gear conflict, but it's a PR thing for Fish and Wildlife. It would really benefit that particular landowner. And I thought they were going to make a comment. Maybe they haven't yet, but I'm hoping that they will. So I do want to throw some support to that. Previously, someone commented about opening the nacelle up to the weir earlier. That's been tried. We didn't make egg take. It wasn't open last year, and we didn't make egg take. So I absolutely do not support that. It was hell for the landowners when it was open. So I would just like to see that section of river stay closed, allow our escapement to occur, and go from there. Let's see, I've got a couple other things. Oh, I did, I spoke with Sergeant Warwick of OSP, that's in Oregon. Their state police do their game enforcement. You know, because I'd heard they had a leader length rule and a bobber rule, and I wanted to talk to him about that. And he did say that it has been fairly effective. So that's just for you guys' sake, something you might want to look at in their regulations. But the other thing that I noticed in going through the regulations is all fish have to be hooked in the mouth. That's their rule. And which just kind of reinforces what I feel needs to happen. Not so much later in the season when there's lots of water and you get an occasional fish that'll take a swipe and you'll hook it in the head, but during that early season, to just not give those people that are not wanting to really get a fish hooked in the mouth, but want to be able to retain a fish. It's another way of reducing their opportunity to do so and possibly changing their behavior. So anyway, I think that's what I've got for now, and appreciate what you guys are doing. Oh,
Thanks,
hey,
Steve.
I got one more comment. I've got one more comment. Someone was questioning about the two fish bag and retaining a coho in the bay, Willapa Bay. And I believe last year they were allowed to do that, and it looks like what you're having a couple of the models shows that as happening. And I know from my interactions with staff in the past, I don't fish the bay, but I kind of try to keep track of the successes there. And from what I've been told, the impact rate is so low on those wild coho in the marine area. It's really not a big factor. So I have no problem with that particular proposal in the marine area. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Our next hand is from Lance. Lance, go ahead.
Oh, I'm muted, I hope.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, Aaron. Yeah, I haven't met you yet, and I'm a little disappointed that Marlene let you get involved with this, but It is what we do every year. So, my first comment is going to be some of the stuff that Steve just commented on. We opened that river section up before. We've done this every year. We've had the same comments, so we'll go through it again. And it was closed because of snagging. We opened it back up when the start of this policy thing. Thought it'd be a great thing. We couldn't control the snagging and the craziness that went on there, and we closed it again. But we always seem to want to reopen it. But give the fish a chance when they get that far along to spawn and do their thing. I sport fish some, but I don't understand what we're trying to do by making this rule of putting a fish back that you foul hooked and counting it, because unless somebody's standing there, and I know enforcement's very busy in August, September. They're stretched thin, it seems like, all the time anyways, but unless they're standing there watching you and you're not going to write it down, you know, a guy catches 2 fish, doesn't write it down, gets in his truck, drives up the river 100 yards and starts, or, you know, quarter mile and starts fishing again. Nobody's going to know that he wrote it down unless somebody's following him. I mean, I see a ton of problems with that. When I feel like the issue that you're trying to fix are the people that are snagging with jigs. And I just, you know, when I was a younger man, and that was the thing people did, was slid a lead down to their hook and put a piece of yarn on there, and away they went. I mean, that was the basic snagging is 30 years ago, and now we've legalized it. So that's my comment on that. Let's see, what else did I jot down over here? Oh, on your bag limits, I'm all about, if you can get more fish for the sport fishery, if there's extra surplus fish, but I'm not in favor of us putting down a 3 fish bag limit anytime in April. And I don't mind you doing it during the season. If we see enough fish to have a 3 fish bag limit, they're going to go into the hatchery and get killed anyways, go for it. But when you put it down now and it doesn't happen, then everybody's mad at you and it starts to fight. Why did this guy get to do, you know, gill netter's got the fish and now we don't get our 3 fish. So I'm in support of just do a 2 fish bag. If you can do it wild on coho. And then when it gets, you know, most of the coho fishery that people really want is November and December. If you can let them catch 3 fish because we have excess fish, have at it. But don't set yourself up for everybody being mad about not getting that bag limit. Try to manage the thing as we go. Look at what catches are, look at, you know, what's going on. And then if we can do it, make a rule that says, hey, next week you can go to a 3 fish bag. We have no problem changing it when we want to close it. So I don't think that'll be an issue. As far as the commercial stuff, it's hard to run things without a model. And I hopefully will be able to, you know, there's no modeling in this meeting. So I don't have a whole lot to say about the commercial part. So that's where we are for now, for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next hand is from Bob. Bob, go ahead. Bob, you can unmute now. Go ahead.
There you go. Got me now. I just would like to support option B for the Chehalis system. I think that getting us through December 15th is the best thing. I'm not sure about, I don't really know how to feel about trying to adjust limits and adjust things through the season. I know how hard that is to do. And because we don't have a weir or a dam to count those fish, you know, we might be adjusting something that we don't really know. We might have a raise in fish, looks good, and then all of a sudden there's not fish. I think you're just better off getting a good plan going forward to the 15th and managing that as it is. I also appreciate your efforts on the Chinook side of things. You haven't had a Chinook fishery in the Chehalis for I don't know how many years. And I think that when you have people using the bait and doing all that kind of stuff and targeting those Chinooks, it's not helping you get more Chinooks into the system. So I think taking an aggressive approach to stopping that kind of stuff is really good for the system. So that's all I really have, other than, like I said, I really want to make sure that you can get to that December 15th timeframe, if you can. I know that, 2 seasons ago, you guys had intense monitoring in that time frame, and I know there were no steelhead caught in the 15 days. So hopefully we can look at that as we go forward into that modeling. So thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And that was our last hand for now. So just a reminder, star 9 to raise your hand. I am not seeing any more hands. Oh, there. Oh. Oh, there's Dave has his hand up. Dave, go ahead.
I was busy muting and unmuting myself about a mile behind what my screen said. Okay, a couple things. This previous gentleman, this ain't a debate thing, but he was pointing out fish to the into the escapement. And right here, I'll point out again for everybody watching, we don't have a harvest in the Chehalis for Chinook, and it's got nothing to do with terminal fisheries. It does nothing to do with the Quinault Nation. It's purely about the intercept by Alaska and BC that takes, give or take, 50% of the run, depending on the year, before they cross the bar, okay? The charter boats and stuff take a few, but it's not that large. So the idea, and Mike had already pointed out, it wasn't a conservation thing, it was a fisher problem thing. And so, people say you don't have a Chinook fishery for X and this and that. And I would say, if you don't, I send it around, Mike will give it to you. He's very good. Him and Kim are getting information out, and you just go to the tab where it's got the total harvest, who gets what where. It's in the model every year, and you'll see we are in deep crap before the fish ever arrive here on an average year, maybe a couple thousand harvestable if we're lucky. And the nation doesn't violate it too bad because they manage for Grace Harbor and we take a lot on the hump because of catch and release. And so it kind of gets close to being average there. So this terminal harvest thing, trying to get fish up to the spawner, that's after they've been butchered in the marine. There's not been a governor, not been a federal rep or senator, not been a director of fisheries, not been a member of the commission. I have, in the 43 years that I've been around WDFW in one form or another, not seen anyone object to that debauchery in the ocean. Okay, so when you hear Mike say he above Fuller Hill, I understand what he's saying. There's a problem with a group of people, and I'm not going to start saying who people are, but it is an issue. The other side of the coin is dead fish in the bottom of the river is an accepted price that we pay for our fisheries. The gill nets have a dropout rate. I would argue it's a bit low, especially on Chinook, because I watch the sea lions in action, and them little fellows are very good, and you can count them, almost every one that the sea lions get by the seagulls. It's an interesting thing to watch. So that, the conservation issue on the Chinook, if you're going to butcher them all the way up from Alaska all the way down, and then when you get a 1.5 mile point of river, and there is not a numerical value, in other words, 1 to 100, how many fish is it removing from the escapement? That's kind of a double standard, okay? I understand, I know several people that have objected over time. They're local people up there. I know a couple enforcement officers who are rather adamant about it. And I understand their point of view that I totally disagree with. Whatever standard you use, you have to apply to all. You can't pick one little section of the river. Now, if you were telling me you had 200 people out there snagging the crap out of fish, that's one thing. When you say you have 15 to 20 that are fishing legally, but they're catching a fish that they're not supposed to and they're releasing it, you have got to explain to me how that's different than what they do in the marine, how they do it in the bay, how they do it in the tidewater, anywhere else. This is an exception to the rule that you can't quantify on how much goes in there. Because when you say dead fish at the bottom of the river, because we have to release Chinook and cannot retain them because of the numbers where we get, we're limited to 5% hooking mortality. Now that 5% has a number attached to it. And if we did everything to the model, this and that, we would have several hundred dead Chinook in the river, in the bay, somewhere, okay? So, you know, the concept raised by the gentleman, more fish into the spawn, this is about the last place you try to get more fish into the spawn. The damage is done well before that. And this is no different than, say, somebody that's fishing Johns River that will get coho, but they also get a lot of Chinook. It's no different in the tidewater where I fish, because certain times you can do the same thing. This, you know, so this is an optics thing for some citizens and several WDFW employees. So, you know, if you're going to do something, you got to treat everybody the same. Enforcement's got the ability to enforce the rules. So, you know, it's just not equitable, okay? And if it was for conservation, I'll put my time up with Chinook, anybody in the damn world. And that, if it's not a conservation issue, the catching and releasing Chinook should be discouraged. The other side of the coin is, how can that be different than we fish salmon and have to release a steelhead or this or that? Catch and release is an accepted practices from the marine area across this state. And you're now applying it a different standard to a 1.5 mile section of river. Okay. And so if enforcement's got a problem with it, they should clearly identify it, the number of people, what is going on. They have video cameras, they have everything else. They can document this up and do it properly. But just to arbitrarily take and say, because several staff and some citizens are objecting to a legal fishery with the same standards applied that goes all the way out to the marine fisheries, that is patently wrong. You're muted, Mike.
Yep, just noticed that. I really appreciate your conversation, your comments, Dave, and I think I would appreciate some personal conversations, maybe tomorrow or next week, and we can really kind of clear up this situation.
Yeah, I'll be 76 tomorrow.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Oh, it took me a minute to figure out what the heck that meant.
That was our last hand. So one last reminder for folks on the phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 or the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen. Okay, I think that might be the last one for the night.
Great, thank you, Leah. I just want to remind everybody again that if they have additional comments, there's a link here on this last slide where you can submit your North Falcon related comments electronically. You can also, if you haven't yet, joined either or both of our Grays Harbor and Willapa Bay distribution lists. We want to wish an extra special happy birthday to Dave, and we look forward to seeing you all again next month, and everybody have a wonderful evening. Good night.